Thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Courtney Flipper. I'm the Senior Community Manager for PreSales Collective. Just a couple of housekeeping items for you. Please continue lighting up that chat. We want to hear everything. We want to hear your thoughts, ideas, insights. But if you have questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen so that our host and guests can see those coming in. We get them all addressed. As Jack mentioned earlier, make sure your chat is set to everyone, not just hosts and panelists, so everyone can see your chat. On that note, thank you for being here again. I'm going to pass it off to Jack Cochran.
Thanks, Courtney. Yeah, welcome everyone to our webinar, and thank you as well to our partner Consensus for sponsoring this event so we can bring this content to you. I'm really excited for today's session because I've been talking to a lot of people, and a lot of the conversation is, okay, so what do we do other than just the demo when we're prepping? And there's been a lot of conversations on driving towards value that we've been having and seeing a lot of new tooling that's coming out to make, frankly, the demos easier to do so that you can get to the parts of the conversation that actually drive a deal forward. And that's what today's session is going to be all about. Without further ado, I want to turn it over to Allison, who is going to be hosting today's session, introducing our panel, and running us through everything. So, Allison, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jack. Hi, everyone. I see some names I know, but nice to meet you if I haven't met you already. My name is Allison Makalik, and I am a seasoned leader with over a decade experience in pre-sales, which I feel, it's kind of rare. It's like, what is this field? Oh, I've been living in it for over a year. I have a high emotional IQ. That's what I talk about a lot on LinkedIn. And I'm really committed to empowering others and helping them find their voice. I helped co-found the WISE chapter at salesforce.org when I was there. I coach with the PreSales Collective, and I co-created 4 Under 3, where we talk about imposter talks on our podcast. And we have a Fight Your Imposter workshop we're actually bringing to Demo Fest with Consensus in April. So my core values are fairness and vulnerability, and I bring that to my current role as a director of solutions at Ontic. And I hope to inspire others through work and leadership in everything I do. So I hope it's a really fun, vulnerable panel today. That's kind of my vibe. And so with that, I'm going to pass it off to our amazing panelists we have for you. Sarah, I see you first. Could you please introduce yourself to this amazing crowd we have today?
Thanks so much, Allison. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Paul. I'm a solution consultant at DocuSign. I spent the first chapter of my career working with some of the best and kindest educators on the planet, learning that patience, creativity, and a good cup of coffee can just solve about any problem we encounter. In my second chapter, I swapped my IT education hat for a solution consulting role, and I really haven't looked back. I think many of us kind of stumble into solution consulting, and I am along with you. I'm an active member in WISE with the DocuSign WISE chapter and sit on the steering committee there. I'm a Toastmaster, and I'm passionate about helping guide our next generation of solution consultants working with DocuSign's internship and mentoring programs. I've taught, I've been taught, I've led, I've been led, and of course, enjoy having conversations with a variety of different individuals. My favorite thing to do outside of work is volunteering. So I'm looking forward to speaking with all of you today and learning a bit more about the panel today too.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. We'll have to connect on the PreSales Collective WISE as well after this.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, Rex, you're next up. I see you.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm Rex Galbraith. I'm the CRO over at Consensus. I think I just LinkedIn told me I hit my 9 years today or yesterday. And so I've seen it all from, the company growing and shrinking. And I've done everything from cleaning the break room, stocking the fridge, to, leading our strategy from a revenue perspective. So it's been an amazing pleasure to just do that for so long. I tend to look at some of the statistics on how long someone actually is the head of revenue, and I'm on borrowed time, it seems like, according to the data. But we're excited. We coined the demo automation phrase over 10 years ago, and to see that there's over 30 companies in the space today is, while there is a competitive aspect, it does give us great joy to know that the space is much bigger than one company alone. And while we want to seek to be the first unicorn in the space, I hope there are many more, because I just think that there's, and the fact that it was run and led and inspired by pre-sales professionals is exciting. So I'm excited to be part of this, even though I've never been a pre-sales person by title. My appreciation over the last 9 years has grown tremendously. So I'm excited to be on this.
Awesome. Thanks, Rex. Happy anniversary. 9 years. Wow, that's impressive. Okay, Brian, we'd love to hear from you.
Well, thanks, Allison. Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Ivanovic. I lead pre-sales or solutions engineering, as we call it here at Amplitude globally. Very fortunate to have an amazing team here of folks. I've been in and around pre-sales or sales engineering for 15 going on 20 years now. My background has always been in marketing technology, data, and related things, with former stints at Adobe and Oracle. I think, my goal for today is, hopefully for all of you who are taking time out of your day or your evening, is to just provide like very transparent and clear advice based on my experience, and hopefully help you all in some sort of way. So that's what I'm going to be focused on today. And so if there's anything that you want to follow up on, like, please add me on LinkedIn. I really want to give back to the community, and I really want to make sure that this time is valuable for you. So that's what I'm going to be focused on. So with that, Allison, turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What a fantastic panel. I'm excited. Okay, so the topic at hand today is moving beyond the demo. So we're going to start with a story, and you can raise your hand. Who here of our panelists, and please add it in the chat if you'd like, who here has ever had to power through 3, 4, 5, 6 demos back to back, or even trying to get the deal to close with different stakeholders, different groups? Why did it happen? What would you have done differently? And how do you keep everything straight afterward to get to that close? So I know we have some answers here before. So Sarah, I'm actually going to call on you. We'd love to hear your experience.
Thanks, Allison. It's such a funny thing to think about when you're done with that day and you look back and you think, what just happened? And how do I remember what to do next, especially if they're back to back to back? We were sort of joking as a panel before everybody jumped in about how we needed to schedule time to get up and refill our water bottles throughout the day. And, I think a majority of the days that go like that for me are kind of a race. And I know that I'm not being my best self in those moments. So part of the challenge that I've accepted and worked towards is to make sure that I am the best steward of my own calendar that I can be, whether that's blocking some time in the day or asking people if they can just please reach out before they throw things on my calendar. I also did kind of refresh myself on the whole idea of a chronotype. And really the idea behind that is, when are you your best self? When are you your most efficient self throughout the day? And figuring out that I'm somebody who peaks at a certain time of day, I dip at another time of day, I can kind of come up again with some energy levels. That knowing kind of when those peak times are, it's really where I try to focus and spend the most amount of my effort in those peak times, and then do more administrative tasks during the times when I know my energy level is going to dip down. So those are the kind of days that I look back on and reflect on, and hopefully are few and far between. But I think we all know we're busy people and our resources are often limited. So there aren't a lot of us and a lot of demands that fall on our shoulders.
Yes, correct. One thing we started doing with my team at Ontic is we are trying to max out on 2 to 3 demos a day to give them time to think, to be strategic, to focus on scaling. We have consensus now, which we will talk about in a little bit. But we even have like a block at the top of the calendars. Like, if you've hit that max, let's look at another day. We are not robots. We cannot just keep operating like that. So I get it. I really identify with the block our calendars to drink water. It's like, no, we're human beings. Like, We need to be able to effectively communicate our product to the client. So I like it. Thanks, Sarah. I like that chromotype you were talking about.
Yeah, I actually had
Yeah,
to.
I was gonna say, what about you, Rex?
I was gonna say I had to Google chronotypes. I don't know if, but now it's kind of on my list to go look at that because I relate with it a lot in terms of just peak time, which typically for me is right in the morning. I feel like in the first hour and a half, because I'm an early riser, I probably get as much done as I do the next like 5, 6, 7 hours. Um, but rolling into that, I've never been officially a pre-sales, leader or professional. But there was a point in Consensus's history, we had a lot of up and downs where we did everything wrong, and the company was at like 30 employees and shrunk down to 7. And so my title was only a title to the point where I had to change it because people are like, why is the VP, SVP reaching out and doing like SDR work? And so for about 2 or 3 years, I was literally just demoing all day, 3, 4, 5 demos back to back, where like people were jumping onto the Zoom meeting from the other meeting, and it got like awkward because I didn't set it up right. And what was crazy is at that time, I thought I was winning. I was like, demo quantity is winning. And that's why I love the topic that we have today, is that it took me time to understand that a demo can kill a deal, but it won't win one. And just because I was to the point where you could wake me up cold and I could do a full-fledged demo and I feel like I was just crushing it, but the discovery was weak, non-existent, but the showmanship was there. So kind of going to the topic, I learned really quickly that what you do around a demo is at least as important and probably more important than how you perform on the demo itself. So very hard to do when you're doing back to back to backs. And I will be guilty of this. Most sales reps are very kind with their pre-sales team members' time, and you've got to demand that respect, or they will treat you like a robot. So it's building that trust and making sure that they understand that they'll get the best of you at certain times with the right preparation.
Right. We say a lot internally, the demo is the icing on the cake. Like it's the icing. You got to
Think
get
about it.
all your ingredients into that cake, and then the demo is the icing. It's not the main ingredient. So, but on that, so let's say we have the demo, right? We're talking about moving past the demo today. What are the most common reasons deals lose momentum post-demo, and how can pre-sales teams proactively address them? And Brian, I'd love to pass that to you first.
Yeah, for sure. I think that the big thing for me that you'll probably hear throughout this entire hour is relationships. And one of the things that I was guilty of earlier in my career definitely was just being very coin operated, and that, oh, we've got a demo on Friday, put a prep call on my calendar on Thursday, I'll go, I'll do that demo, and then I'm not going to think about that deal until the AE follows up with me again and schedules the next thing on your calendar. But the larger the transaction size, the more you need to find commonalities with the people that you're interacting with and proactively reach out to them and create some sort of connection. That connection could be, you like a similar sport, you have kids the same age. It could be that you're going to happen to be in their town in a couple of weeks. It could be anything. But more and more and more, like, you need to break this curse of Zoom, especially in very large deals. If you're selling things that are 50K or 75K, well, you can probably get away with a lot of remote selling. But if you're selling things that are, 750K, $2 million, $4 million, like, you need to be creating those relationships, because that's the only way you're going to get real information about what's going on inside of large, complex enterprises. So that's thing one. I think thing two, though, and again, this will be more pronounced because we work on larger deals at Amplitude typically. If you're not actually aligned to solving a problem that the budget holder really cares about, then it doesn't matter. Like, you're mistaking activity for progress. And so, one of the things, you have to, I would say, first of all, you need to build a relationship with the salespeople that you support so that you can actually have honest conversations with them. And then second of all, you have to be really honest together and say, like, do we actually know the person who buys this thing, who signs the contract or who signs off on budget, like what they care about, and how we solve a problem for them? Because if we don't, it's not going to go anywhere. But again, if you're selling smaller deals, then you can probably get away being a little bit looser on those two things. But those are the top two things, especially as you get into larger enterprise deals.
Yeah. Brian, I think there could be an entire panel around building relationships outside of Zoom. In the world of Zoom, building relationships outside of Zoom that we could have, because I agree with you there. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Did
Okay.
Allison, did you hear the Jamie Dimon rant about Zoom last week?
No, I didn't. I missed
Oh,
it.
well, it's not safe for work, or I guess it was at work, but some of the language is not safe for work. But anyone who's on social, you can check that out. He's not a fan of Zoom.
Okay.
Mm.
I mean, I like it. I'm big on relationships, and just like there's different things you can do to build relationships through our little box. So it sounds like you're passionate about that too. Sarah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
To kind of piggyback off of what Brian has mentioned already, a lot of the things that I feel like going into a demonstration or going into an opportunity help to predict some of the outcomes. So it's definitely, it's not like a one-to-one where if this is missing, therefore the deal doesn't close. But there are some indicators along the way that help reduce the likelihood that something like that may happen. And one of the key things that I've experienced is making sure that I understand who's in the room and who I'm speaking to. Sometimes in faster paced deals or deals where you're going from one opportunity to the next throughout the day, or you're working at a really fast clip, some of those little details get missed and they turn out to be big opportunities that are also missed. So if I'm speaking to a CEO, but I'm talking, end user functionality, that's really not going to be the best use of the CEO's time, nor does that shed or put our company in the best light. So understanding who those key stakeholders are is a huge thing, along with just doing excellent discovery. So a lot of what we need to be doing as solution consultants is listening. 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? So as we're speaking on discovery calls, the best calls I've gotten off of, actually have had a few AEs say, I'm so sorry, that customer just talked the whole time. And I'm thinking that was the best discovery call ever, because they were just unloading, and it wasn't irrelevant things. It was information that was really helpful for me to understand the pain that they're experiencing. Usually that passion is tied to some pain of some kind that we can potentially look to resolve. And, those are the calls that really are the best calls when we have those deep discovery calls. When we skip discovery, that also puts us at a level for reduced success, in my opinion.
Yeah, my director at Salesforce, he would always say, no disco dancing, or no demo dancing without sweet disco dancing. Like you had to have the disco before the demo. We made shirts. It was a whole thing. Rex, I'd love to hear from you when we're talking about pain points. Talk to us about the cost of inaction.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I've noticed, post demo is if you can't attach yourself to the number one or number two biggest problem or initiative within an organization, the thing that's third, fourth, and fifth most important just tends to stay there. And so I think most of the time, when you have a good pre-sales team and a good rep, they tend to give a demo and most people will nod and say yes, and then the momentum's lost. I think number one, from like lack of relationship, and two, it just doesn't hurt enough to make the change. And I've learned as human beings, unless it's hurts enough, we will kind of stay on our path. And I'm super guilty of that. There's been a major shift, and I don't know when it happened. I just know that it did happen. The buyer's role has changed to the seller, and the seller has changed to the buyer. And what I mean by that is Rue Dickinson, if you guys follow him, and he mentioned something that your buyers and prospects don't know what to do next. And I used to assume that when I'd call these big companies and I'd show them that they would connect the dots, that they'd be like, oh, pain, outcome, and a tool. Like let's start the negotiation and let's talk about what it takes to implement this. They don't know what to do next. It's a complex world. There's a lot of moving parts. And if you've been at a company long enough, you've been through so many cycles that you probably know the decision criteria, the buying process as good or better than your champion because there's similar motions that happen and you know the challenges that they'll come across. So you should be going into the meeting not saying, what do we do next? Is you tell them companies that succeed and do well do this next. You're not forcing them, but you're showing authoritatively that like I've seen success and I know what it takes. And while giving them, they obviously can do what they want, buyers don't know what to do next 95% of the time. And so you got to be ready and not just assume and leave that burden. That is your job as a seller, as a pre-sales consultant, to tell them what the best practices are at every stage, while they're doing security, while they're doing negotiation, while they're onboarding, etc. So that shift is big. Most of your champions will understand what it takes to sell to their company. They'll struggle with knowing how to buy your product. But if you've done 30, 40, 50 different sales, you probably know as much as they do or more.
Rex, let's dive into that just a little deeper. So when you're saying it's our, responsibility to show them best practices, what to do next, what's the best way you found to do that? Is it, getting consensus inside of like a live meeting and these are our next steps? Is it having, someone to help them along the path? Is it a consensus video? Like, what have you seen that works really well for everyone on the panel today?
I'll go back. I'll go quick on this one.
Okay.
There are tools. There's consensus. There's other tools, and they help a lot. Digital is, we've always called it like an Iron Man suit. It only does well if the person inside of the suit knows what they're doing.
Hmm.
And so I'll tell you something I stumbled upon once. And so I was doing 100 demos, right? All the time, back to back to back. And I had 2 monitors. So I started sharing my screen and started doing a demo. And normally when I take notes, I write down phrases that they say and I quote it so I can remember exact words that they used. And I was talking to a group, and I don't remember the guy's name. I think his name was Jack or something. And I wrote, I think Jack is the decision maker. And then Jack said, I'm not the decision maker. And I'm like, wait, are you seeing my notes screen? And they're like, yes. And I was like, how long have you been seeing my notes screen? And they're like, for like 5 minutes. We just been entertained watching you take notes on us. So I was like, I think they have 50 salespeople. Jack is the decision maker. And they're like, I'm not the decision maker. Susan's the decision maker. And by the way, we have 40 reps, not 50. And they started correcting my notes.
Wow.
And so I said, well, why don't we just leave this up and just keep going? And what I stumbled across was mutual notes. It becomes a mutual action plan, but I write my notes in front of them. And what I've learned is a lot of times, like, can you give me access to that? I will update that. And I've learned most people are willing to correct your notes than they will. So if I said, what's the average cost of a deal? Well, I don't know. It depends what category this. If I wrote, normally in this industry, it's 50K. They'll go, no, it's actually 70. So what I've learned is take notes together. Don't do them in different places. And what you'll learn is that you'll come together and they will quickly correct you where you're off. And so that has allowed me and my team, I really push for that, is a single place where you guys can come together and you've basically built an outline, a pain, and a result mutually rather than in silos.
I'll just give a quick shout out to Ammon. He does that. So we're going through consensus at my company and onboarding. And when we have our meetings, we have a Miro board and we're working together. We both have access as we're filling out our pain points and what we're trying to launch and everything. I never thought about it even from like a Google Notes doc too. Like getting back to basics.
I'm glad one person on my team listens, so that's good to know.
He's the best. We meet every week right now. He's fantastic. Giving him a shout out. Okay, that's actually great. I'm going to take that back to my team. Thank you. All right, let's dive back into the questions here. So this is the pre-sales collective. So we're going to talk about this from a pre-sales perspective. How can pre-sales teams help surface hidden decision criteria that may not have been discussed during the demo? And Brian, I'd love to hear from you.
I'm going to be a bit of broken record here, but you've got to find people and connect with them. So if there's that one person who is asking a bunch of questions as you're going through it, like follow up with them one-on-one without the AE and say, you had a bunch of great questions. I'd love to dive in more, Can we get on a quick call later? And then nurture the heck out of that relationship. Like, the one thing that I found is that you get way more in a one-on-one telephone conversation in terms of honest feedback and honest information than you do on a Zoom with 3 or 4 people. Because when that person is sitting there with their colleagues, they're like, well, what am I going to say in front of my colleagues? And, so on and so forth. But if you can get to somebody and start actually building that relationship, like that's where the gold is. Like one of the guys I used to work with said, like, all selling happens in between the meetings. And it's true. Like, it's not, the big meetings are the big meetings and you have to do them well. And I think to the point earlier, you can lose a deal in a big meeting, but I don't think I've ever won a deal in a big meeting alone, because there's so much consensus, no pun intended, required at these large organizations. And you have to have relationships with all of the people who are going to provide their input into the final decision. And so I would say relationships, get the heck off Zoom and get in front of people whenever you can. Take them out for a coffee or lunch, or find other creative ways to like break through this barrier. Like, you cannot build relationships over Zoom. Like, sorry, Zoom, I hope you're not partially sponsoring this, because you can't do it. I've never built a relationship over Zoom. And, the minute I meet someone in person and shake their hand or give them a hug or whatever, like, there's a bond there that's just totally different. And so, if you want to uncover what's actually going on inside of a sales process or a decision, like, you need to get one-on-one with people.
I have a question for you on that. Have you ever experienced an AE or an EAE who doesn't like their pre-sales person to reach out and build that relationship, or has it always been a positive in empowering you to do so? To be fair, I've experienced both, so I just like to have what's happening.
Yeah, well, I think the question, Allison, is if there's a question, if there's reluctance there, then what's underneath the reluctance, right? The reluctance is, in my view or in my experience, hey, I don't trust you. Like, that's essentially what they're saying.
Yeah, you have to build
saying,
that.
I don't trust you with my deal, in which case the first relationship you need to go build is with that account executive. And say, like, I know we talked about this earlier about like what happens when your calendar gets overloaded and all that sort of thing. Well, it gets overloaded, I think, in part because they're just seeing you as this robot, and they're not seeing you as a person who's really there to help them accelerate and close the deal. And so if you just reach out to them on the phone, which is better than Zoom, and you say, hey, I'm not going to be my best self today. Like, I don't think this is going to advance the deal. That'll go a long way. And similarly, if you reach out and say, I really want to connect with Judy, she was asking all these great questions. I think that she's super technical, and I think I could take on the Judy relationship and you could take on the Hank relationship. And I think we could triangulate and kind of move this thing forward. And, oh, by the way, if your contact goes silent, I've always got Judy. Like, who wouldn't want that? So the question is, if someone's feeling trepidatious about you owning a relationship, the first thing you've got to solve is your relationship with the AE.
I love that, Brian. I think so many SEs think that they can't be empowered and they can't take that approach. But I think, to your point, just building that trust with your AE, because who wouldn't want an additional relationship with your customer? Who wouldn't want that? So simple. Thank you. Sarah, I'd love to hear from you again, really from a pre-sales team, what we can do around that hidden decision criteria.
I think one of the toughest things that, whether it was pre-COVID or post-COVID that we encounter is our virtual meeting setup. So, it's impossible to be able to count on people, for example, just having their cameras on. It seems like a really simple thing, but when you are trying to figure out a specific customer, or figure out maybe who your champions are going to be, you're going by just audio in a lot of circumstances, even if you set a precedent when you hop on the call that you're going to turn your camera on. And I think that really ties into one of the biggest things that I've experienced related to trying to get the decision makers or the deal to move along, which is reading the room. So as a pre-sales person, we sometimes are part of the deal for just a short time of the life cycle with that customer. We're maybe not going to be with them from day 1 to day 100. Sometimes we're just in the mix for just a short period of time. What that awards us and affords us is an opportunity, oftentimes on calls, to kind of step back from the keyboard for a second, stop typing for a second, and listen. So I'm just actively listening to what people are saying. I'm looking at people's eye contact. I can take the space to slow down my pattern of speaking, engage people in different ways, and try to figure out if somebody is visibly uncomfortable or visibly distracted. What am I going to do in those circumstances to pull them in? Because that very well may be the person that we need to convince to move forward with this particular deal. I've heard many people speak over the years about how they're just terrible at reading the room. For me, it's a skill you have to exercise. It's a muscle you need to work in order to really decide if you need to push somebody else along or help them along. And so I feel like, especially nowadays where sadly a lot of meetings are on Zoom or some sort of electronic medium, it's becomes that much more difficult.
Yeah, thanks for that. It's like we have this additional kind of lens that we can watch than the seller does. It's kind of our superpower. So thanks, Sarah. Rex, anything else that you think? We've heard a lot about, spending time. I saw a question here in the chat from Russell about face-to-face interactions. I think to Brian's point, even just picking up the phone and calling Judy goes a long way if you can't get face-to-face or you're remote, things like that. Rex, anything else that you want to just add on to here for that surfacing that hidden decision criteria? Oh, wait, you're on mute.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I had the mute button on. I put a question in there around if people are, med pick fans or medic fans, but decision criteria was a term that they coined. And it is a big, if you work with me, it's something, if anyone ever asks me to get involved with a deal, I'm always asking, like, what's the decision criteria and what's the decision process? And I've come up with 3 observations. Negotiating, Consensus has over 500 customers. I've probably been involved with 300 of them to 400 of them, like personally, kind of at the final stages. And while decision criteria should be brought up very early, I call this the 3 rings. And basically, in every deal I've noticed, buyers will ring the towel 3 times. It doesn't matter. You could give them a 99% discount with unlimited licenses, and they'll ring once, they'll ring twice. And it comes from typically 3 groups. You get the ring from the champion, you get the ring from security, and you get the ring from finance. And finance, CFO, has more power than I've ever seen before. It used to be that sales leaders and marketing could make a decision and kind of swipe a card on smaller transactions. I don't see that anymore. Everything goes up and gets approval because right now CFOs are consolidating tech while heads of revenue are trying to expand the tech and the usage. So what I would say is you have to realize that an organization is a bunch of individuals with individual wants and needs, and they tend to be categorized in at least 3 groups. And so there's a complexity to that, and it's very difficult. And so you have to realize that even if you know the decision criteria of your champion, there's at least 2 more where your finance team and the business will have very different. And I've seen security teams that are like, I don't care what the business says. I don't care if there's budget. If you don't meet this criteria, they're not getting my stamp of approval, and this goes nowhere. So it's delicately balancing multiple decision criterias, and knowing how to speak to those audiences. And what I've learned is sales is probably almost the least trusted, and I would say pre-sales is probably the most trusted when it comes to those types of discussions.
That's why I've seen a big shift in just language around pre-sales over the last couple of years is we are the trusted advisor. Like that's who we get to be. And
The
that
most
goes a long
trusted.
way. Yeah,
Our
exactly.
research has said that pre-sales on go-to-market teams are the most trusted individual in a purchasing discussion.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna pull a question, an anonymous question here from the chat. And Brian, I think this is best suited for you. Just really going back to the idea that pre-sales can be empowered to also have relationships as well. We're talking about how Rex just said, our research is showing we are the most trusted, talking everything Sarah is, watching and listening and learning. We had a question come through that said, what would be your advice, essentially, if you have an AE resisting building that relationship purely because they may be slightly uncomfortable with the SE getting more credit on winning an opportunity? Maybe they have the fear of being overshadowed. If yes, how did you overcome this? And Brian, I think you'd be a really good one to answer this question for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, I guess, a couple ideas that come to mind. The first is, talk to your manager about it and get your manager's coaching, because that person is going to know the particulars of the personalities better than I or anyone else on this call will. So talk to your manager and try to understand from that perspective. I think the other thing is, if that's truly what's going on, if it's truly like insecurity, then that's unfortunately that sales person has a lot of growing to do, and maybe your manager can talk to their manager about helping them grow and sell more collaboratively. I've definitely seen really, really successful lone wolf salespeople over the course of my career, but the deals get bigger and they become even more successful once they start bringing in more people. So I think that, if you just appeal to everyone's self-interest, which is like, don't you want to sell more? Don't you want to earn more? Like salespeople want to earn a lot of money. That's the kind of way I would go about it. But I think the other thing is like, it still sounds to me from that question like you're arm's length away from this person and you're not really friends with them or not really super close with them. I think that to me, there's definitely some barrier there between the SE and the AE, and it's like, I don't know if it's going out for a beer or spending more time at sales kickoff together, or just finding any opportunity when you'll be in the same city together to spend unstructured time talking about families and interests and things like that. But you've got to get out of the like, this demo is coming up. Okay, well, we got to do that. And then the next conversation is about the next demo. Like you've got to get out of that. And so hopefully that helps. I know it's not entirely straightforward because so much of this, it depends on the people involved and what their insecurities are and what's underneath it all.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's a good reminder. If you have questions you don't want published publicly, you can also just send to us as well, and you'll remain anonymous. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Okay. We're gonna hop into, let's time check. Okay, we're doing pretty good. Let's talk about creative approaches to making champions more successful internally. Sarah, I want to hear from you around your experience with champions.
I think when we start looking for champions on a project, it's just unlocking the potential that perhaps we didn't have before. I was just on a call yesterday where it was a one-on-one type of a situation with a client, and the information that we gathered from that individual, again, because we were just talking with one person, they were much more willing to show their cards in a way that they probably wouldn't have if other stakeholders had been on the call. So in preparing for a demonstration that we'll be doing for the upper level management, I was able to ask questions related to personality traits, things that people are looking for, what really resonates for this person might not resonate for that person. Don't mention X, Y, and Z. Some people get kind of triggered or shut down if we head a certain direction. So if you can get a stakeholder on board early on and start to have those honest conversations, it's taken a couple calls to develop that rapport over the last couple of months. But we were able to just kind of knock down the walls a little bit and say, tell me what the best chance of success is going to be, because I knew that this individual is heading our direction for the win, if you will. And using his knowledge of his team could just be so much more powerful if we're able to anticipate some roadblocks, or somebody's always, concerned about this, that, or the other thing. And it just helps create that relationship that's going to go farther. Where that gets almost into like a hypercharged situation is when that stakeholder becomes the champion on the demonstration as well. So if we've done our job right, if they've seen enough or heard enough where they start selling to their own team for us, those are the demos I think we can all agree that are just, those are the ones where I just want to shut my laptop and say my work here is done. It's such a huge amount of momentum that you gain from somebody on the inside saying, they have this, or don't worry, this is in place. It's happened to me in demonstrations where somebody's joined halfway through and asked me to start over again. And an internal person will say, hey, don't worry about starting over again, Sarah. Here's the thing. And they turn around and start talking to their own team about what we have. And it's just magic.
I love that. Just honestly, we're talking about consensus. I know what you're talking about because I helped implement it at Salesforce when I was there. And we would be able to, after a meeting, we would then, for our champion, create a custom quick video for them to go internal. So they knew, and by the end, just like you said, they could basically give a demo or all of our talking points and tie it back to use cases. I was like, yes, exactly. I think Rex, you said that's the magic moment.
It is. It's magic.
It's so good.
It's a good feel. I was on a call just recently where a champion started demoing and just doing everything, and I could tell the rep's mouth was like, I want to jump in, and I messaged him. I said, don't say anything. I'm like, we don't have to say anything the whole time. You just stay quiet. When your champions are pitching, you just shut up. I'm like, no, there is no demo better than from a champion. Like that is the best demo possible. And because it means you did a good job at prepping them and getting them ready to enter. Because in reality, the best demos ever given, you don't know about. It's because they're the internal demos. They're the meetings in between the meetings that we don't get invited to. That's where minds are changed and decisions are made. And so it's not good enough just to do a good demo. They have to be able to do it when you're not there. And so that's equipping them and empowering them and really making them a champion. So
yeah, it's what Brian
Sarah, I
said.
love that. I loved your comments.
Yeah, it's what Brian said, that it's happening in between the meetings. The selling's happening in between the meetings. Rex, real quick before we move on, talk to us about Project Black Belt.
Oh, okay. So I'm glad you brought this one up. So in terms of like helping and equipping champions, what I learned is that from a ton of mistakes is I tried to get our champions and our clients to be at like a black belt level, no matter where they were at in the process. So if they just walked into the dojo for the first time, they can't do the advanced moves and the advanced techniques and all of that. And so we created an initiative internally and it was called Project Black Belt because it's just easier to name things around projects. And the idea was in terms of helping champions create content, namely for consensus and demo content and just for deals in general. And so what we wanted to do is we created a project where we would meet people where they were at. So I hope I'm not over advertising here, but we have something called Demo IQ. You can go onto our website. It's free, and it's an assessment. It takes you 5 minutes. Anyone on your team can take it, and it will judge the quality of your content, the cadence at which you can release it, and the equipment that you're using to do it. And it will give you a level. And based on your level, we have video content and free content that will help you upskill, whether that's video and just content in general. And that is a way that you can empower your champions. I think so many times we think that the only way to empower a champion is to shove our product in their face. Where I've noticed the best reps and the best pre-sales consult, they're sending things. Hey, I just saw a webinar from Allison the other day where she talked about a problem you just brought up. I want to send that to you. And that's where the trust and the relationships come from, is that they're like, oh my gosh, this is not just a constant barrage of pushing consensus in their face or whatever the product is. They truly care about my success. So the one thing I would recommend to the group is release content in a way that's consumable at the level that they're at, because they will not be the best user of your product on day one. I can guarantee you that. And if you give them the black belt stuff today, they probably won't show up for class the next day.
Ooh, I like that. Okay, so we have a question that came through from Q&A. We probably can take that one and then one more, and then we're going to be right at time. This has been super engaging. It seems like we have a lot of questions around the AE-SE relationship. So Brian, I'm going to come back to you. When you are, going after a demo and you're building that relationship and everything we've been talking about, what's an advice that you would give about not negatively impacting the AE relationship, kind of the theme we've been seeing, or having them think that you're holding up the deal? If maybe there is confusion and say, hey, we might need to do another call, or we might need to have another discovery, or we might need to pivot. Have you ever experienced something like that, and what's worked for you?
Yeah. So I think the question is here, like where the AE is basically trying to get things done as quickly as possible, and you're, maybe slowing things down a bit. I think the first question you've got to ask yourself is like, why are you slowing things down? And normally you're slowing things down because you believe that you're going to lose the deal unless you slow things down, or there's some other risk that's going to happen in the deal unless you slow things down, that is material and going to impact the ability for this salesperson to earn their commission. What I found is you just have to explain that directly to the salesperson. Like, you have to start with the why, to, that, like the old saying is, like, the reason why I think we need to slow down and do a separate session to dive into this technical piece is because this group could totally to Rex's point before, this is the InfoSec group and they can totally derail the deal. This could like stall us for weeks or potentially months. They could block us, but whatever it is. But you've got to like explain to them why you are suggesting this, because they don't understand what you understand in terms of the technical nuances and implications of like what's being said. Like, there have been countless times when I hear a question that's coming from someone and I'm like, oh, I think I know what's behind that question. And then I ask a clarifying question. I'm like, yep, okay, I got it. And then I file that away. And then afterwards, I'm like, we've got major risk with this team over here because they're looking at our competitor who does this really well. And they're like focused in on that. And we've got to, you get where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
The point is here is that you have to be very explicit and explain why you want or you think you should slow things down. And if they still have pushback, then that's fine. Escalate it to your manager and let them know, hey, I don't like the way this thing is going, but it's their deal, and I've said my piece, and we keep moving forward.
Yeah. I think a big theme that I'm picking up, obviously relationships from you, Brian, is something that I saw. I think Sarah Jones says this a lot, like always be discovering. And when you're doing that with the client, sometimes we forget that we need to do that internally as well, like getting to the why, and that's okay. We can do that. Like we're curious people by nature. That's why we're in these roles. So always think of that, always be discovering, even with your internal relationships too. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, another way of putting it is also like if you have a different point of view on the deal, you've got to sell that
Yeah.
internally, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
People aren't just because you happen to be really great with the product, it doesn't necessarily mean the salesperson thinks that you have the best sales acumen out there.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. We're going to do one more question, just round robin for the whole panelist. Y'all, this has been amazing. It's going to be our closing advice to everyone. So let's say, you had one piece of advice for everyone, pre-sales focused on this panel today of what has worked for you in your career, what you wish you had known when you were younger. Really that piece, you're like, yes, I'm going to share that. Now is your time. So I'm going to ask each of you. Sarah, I'm going to start with you first.
I think my one piece of advice is to stay curious. If you can continue to show your curiosity, you start connecting with people by asking questions. It's not an in and out situation. That thought that you just heard is coming in, it's rolling around, and maybe now you're going to ask a question to show that you're paying attention. And I think curiosity in life is just a thing that will continue to serve you well.
Love it. That intellectual curiosity will go far. My giving shout outs to John Patton. He was my manager at Salesforce. He said that if someone, even on the interview process, didn't come across as curious, that was it. Even if they had every single thing, he's like, it's not going to be great for this role. So thank you. Brian, and then Rex, you can close us out. Brian, what you got for us?
The one I like is don't try selling to people who can't buy. And what I mean by that is, typically in an organization, there's someone who signs off on a contract. And you can end up talking to their direct reports or their direct reports, or maybe even their direct reports. When you're at that level, your job is to learn what that buyer actually cares about. And that's what your task is. But at some point, someone's going to have to sell to that person who can actually buy. So don't ever mistake the fact that just because you're talking to someone and they like your product, it's not enough. They need to have the budget and authority to actually sign on the line that is dotted. So use the folks in their organization and your champion to actually sell the product for you.
Awesome. Thank you. Rex, last words of advice, please.
Okay, well, take this for what it's worth coming from a sales guy to a pre-sales community, but I have had the opportunity to work with hundreds of pre-sales leaders and organizations. And the one advice that I would give is sell yourself as well as you sell your product. I have seen so many times where pre-sales leaders will come to the table and have the most powerful results, the most amazing things. And I don't know if it's out of humility, out of the nature, they don't boldly proclaim the value that they bring. And sometimes it's because they don't take the time to quantify their own value. They're too busy quantifying it for the champion. Pretend you are a deal and you are trying to position yourself like a deal within your own organization. I am a true believer, and I don't say this just because of the audience that I'm in. I've been around pre-sales people a lot. They are the most trusted advisor. They are the most ubiquitously desired talent within any go-to-market motion, from SDRs, from product, from marketing, from client success to sales. They are the most desired and have the most generalist knowledge in the software world today. And so I would just say, if you can sell yourself as well as you sell your product, your voice will be heard louder, and you'll be able to make that impact, and people will be able to recognize it. So take that for what it's worth, but that is what I've been able to observe from my perspective, having the chance to work with a lot of different pre-sales leaders.
Hey, coming from a sales guy, we'll take it. Thank you. Thanks for being a trusted friend to us as well. All right, Jack, I'm handing it back to you. We got 2 minutes.
This has been absolutely fantastic. I've got some scribbled down notes. I hope everyone else does as well. And if you missed some of it, you can come back and re-listen to it again to pick up on everything else. We'll have this. This will continue to be available for you. But Rex, Sarah, Brian, Allison, thank you so much. Everyone, round of applause in the chat for our panelists, for the content for today. And again, shout out as well to Consensus for sponsoring this, making this available for us to do this webinar for you. But really appreciated the conversation here today. Appreciate it, everybody.